Well, all right. Hello, 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 hello. Sean Brady with another food super very cool leverage your lunch hour. I'm so excited. I'm stumbling over my words. I got one fabulous woman from on the other side of the pond, if you will, in Ireland, getting ready for not only Valentine's Day, but certainly St. Patrick's Day here in the States. And it's Louise McGuane. McGuane like swan. It took me a long time to figure that out, especially after she told me. So all that being said, she is what's known in the industry as a Irish whiskey bonder. And if you look at her track record, not only is she a women forefronted owned business, but she's doing things in her industry that are just super fantabulous. And I wanted her to have her on this show because not only do we love products like Irish whiskey that she made, this is a very cool bottle. I'll show it off more later. But she is doing things industry-wise, not only to shape and build transparency in the industry, but also in business. And isn't that what it's all about in our day and age? Louise, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I am good. I'm coming live from a very snowy west coast of Ireland today. It's snowed today, so it's a little chilly. But we're good. We're hunkered down with a little glass of whiskey. So I'm doing good.
And I'm hunkered down with a big bottle of whiskey. I'm in the Midwest. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. And it's a lovely bottle. And I'm not drinking yet because it's only 11 a.m. my time. So it's more close to brunch happy hour than it is to happy hour.
Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere and it's 5 o'clock here. So
excellent.
I'm the lucky one.
Now you mentioned the snow. We have snow here in the Midwest, and it's when I went out this morning, it was 19 degrees Fahrenheit. So not warm at all. And it was even colder with the wind chill. But as I saw in a previous posting of yours, you usually don't get snow in Ireland there.
No, we don't. We're located right on the left, the most furtherly east part of Europe, like literally where I live in Ireland, it's the west coast of Ireland. And the next stop, if you jumped into the ocean here, the next stop would kind of be New York or Massachusetts, probably. So yeah. We get the continental drift up from Spain, so it stays pretty temperate here year round. It's kind of like the Pacific Northwest, sort of San Francisco, but it doesn't ever get too hot and it doesn't ever get too cold.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like the west coast of America as well. So here's what I want to know from a weather standpoint. You have a fabulous story, which we can go into a little bit if you like, but the thing I'm really curious about is you do something very unique, in my opinion, which is the bonding and blending of all these fabulous whiskeys. How does your specific little property, your little neck of the woods, so to speak, how does that affect how you age and the barrels? Because I've noticed pictures, they're sitting outside your rack house, it seems like. How does that all play into effect with that?
So yeah, it's really interesting. Whiskey, it comes off of the still like water, right? It's clear, it looks like that, and it yes. Gets all of its color obviously off of the barrel, and then a lot of the flavor then just really evolves in the barrel. And depending on where you mature it and the climate that you're maturing it in, you're going to get very different results. Because the liquid is sitting in the cask and it's effectively then it's responding to like barometric pressure and temperature and humidity and things like that. So it's kind of sitting in the cask for years and years and years and years. So it's a long time. So incremental differences all add up, obviously. And it's expanding and contracting in the cask, and it's drawing flavor out of the wood and then aspirating out into the air and aspirating back in again. So our temperature here is very different to Kentucky, obviously. In Kentucky, it gets very, very hot, and then there's a rapid drop in temperature, for example. Yes. Here, it's a lot more consistent, the maturation. So I'm really obsessed with this. It's a very good question because I like a bit of statistics, and I have these little doohickeys all around the rack house where the whiskey is that take measurements like every 2 seconds of like humidity and wind speed and temperature. And it's all in an app on my phone, and I can see exactly what's going on. So we get pretty consistent maturation year round here because maturation ceases below below 7 degrees centigrade, and that's what, about 22, 23 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yep.
It ceases, it stops below that temperature because it's just too cold and the liquid becomes inert. And over here, where I am, we very, very, very rarely go below that. Like today, we've gone below that, but that's the first time all year we've gone below that. So it's a very consistent, mellow kind of form of maturation. And then the stuff that you see outside and things like that, sometimes we run experiments. I want to see what will happen if we stick a cask outside for a while. I want to see what will happen if we put it on the side of a cliff, like near the ocean, because we're very near the ocean here. So those are kind of little experiments. And then you can track, again, statistically, you can dig into the liquid then and send it off to a lab and see what's happening with the flavors and what's going on when you compare different casks. But yeah, very different situation here than Kentucky, for example, or the Caribbean where they mature rum.
Which you've had connections with all these places in your past career. And so I know you've been sourcing all kinds of fun barrels from not just whiskey barrels, but also rum and possibly tequila and all kinds of other things like that. What, and that's one thing I wanted to get right into also is, so you're a bonder, right? You're pulling together all these different flavors, right? That created just a unique experience for the consumer. What's your intent behind all that? Like, what do you as a creator, I would even dare say an artist, hope to get from the people enjoying your brand?
So I don't think I'm an artist, right? I'm a very big fan of artists. So I wouldn't put myself there, but I'm definitely a curator, right? So I'm the next level down maybe from an artist. And my personal intent in what I do here is, I essentially gather together flavors from all over the country. So I work with all these teeny tiny distilleries and very big distilleries all over the island of Ireland. And then I source their distillate, and then I go away and I source casks to put that distillate in. And I'm building like a library of whiskey flavors is how I always describe it. And it's almost like this incredible archive of whiskey from a really interesting time in Irish whiskey. Like when I founded the business only 5 years ago, there were 3 distilleries on the island, and there are 36 now. Wow. So yeah. And that's that's in 5 years, right? And the best part about my job is that I get to meet the creators of the spirit. And also when I go out and I source casks, it's all about, making connections with the people who were using those casks prior. So I go to Louisville, Kentucky a lot, and I meet a lot of makers over there. I've been to Jalisco. I was supposed to go to Oaxaca. All my travel is finished for the moment, but I'm very intentional about who I work with when it comes to sourcing casks and sourcing stock. Like I want to know who they are. I want to know what makes them tick, what their thought process and intention is behind the whiskey that they make or the product that they make. So it's a very kind of holistic way of making whiskey, to coin a phrase. My job, unlike a distillery, starts outside the gate. I'm not focused on my big copper pot still. I'm out in the world meeting people and listening to their kind of stories and taking inspiration from them. So it's pretty cool to be a bonder from a personal standpoint.
I think that's very cool. And I know, even though I worked in Irish pubs back in the day, my single days, right? The distribution and amount of stuff that we got over in the States was very limited. It was even bourbon back then. There was, so many brands, and, you didn't have the complexity and quantity that you do today. What would you say one thing that's unique about Irish whiskey now that you really would love consumers to find out more about?
I think that most people's experience with Irish whiskey is probably the big green bottle. Like it's probably Jameson.
Probably, yes. Maybe just shooting it.
Most people's experience is that one particular brand, right? Yes. And that's a great brand. And it's a really good entry point into Irish whiskey. And what I'd like people to understand is that like there is the quality that's coming out of Ireland, like is unbelievable. Like the some of the rarest stocks of whiskey in the world, including like Japan and including Canada and everywhere else where you pay crazy money, and bourbon country, is Irish whiskey. because there was only a couple of people making it 30 years ago, for example.
Right.
So to find 30-year-old Irish whiskey is almost kind of impossible. And I own some of it. And those stocks are just, they'll blow your mind how unbelievably good they are. And the talent that was in those distilleries many, many years ago, you know, we're now seeing that. And when you drink like the Big Green brand, I think you're getting a really good entry level Irish whiskey. And I think that people should look, I'd like for people to look around the Irish shelf and try something that you've never heard of before. Because the reason you've never heard of it before is that they're probably a pretty new company, and they're coming into it with a different kind of approach, essentially. So being more open-minded, I suppose, around Irish whiskey. It's not just the one big brand. There's an amazing wealth of creators and makers out there doing amazing stuff.
I love that. I mean, to go from 3 distillers now to 36, how many people are really taking on and embracing doing what you're doing? And here's what I love about you doing it is the transparency approach that you bring. And I mentioned that at the beginning, but I love for you to speak in your own words to that point, because I think most people have no idea. And I would, that's even on the state side for bourbons and most alcohol in general. But I love your input as the bonder itself.
Yeah, so the number one thing to know about bonding is that, like, I didn't make it up. Like, it was an actual really big business here in Ireland until the 1930s. Like, if you ever visit Ireland and you drive around any small town, you'll see an old pub, and it probably has the term whiskey bonder written in gold letters somewhere in the window or above the door. And that's the hangover from the old days. Like, up until the 1930s, every town had a whiskey bonder like me. They just went off and they sourced their whiskey and they custom blended it for their customers. Like, you could get one bottle blended for you, kind of thing. Wow. And that's my business model. And I didn't make it up. I just found that business model in the archives. And it was a lot of, like, reading a lot of parliamentary archival information and doing a lot of local history and oral history and speaking to people and stuff like that. And I just realized it was an old business model that had been written out of history, and I decided to bring it back. And then the transparency thing was really natural. Like, that's just my thing, right? That's my vibe. Like, as a person, I worked for 20 odd years in a corporate environment. And when I got out of that, I could finally kind of just be myself. And I wanted to have a business that was delivering real value very truthfully to consumers, because there can be a lot of guff in any kind of industry, you know, there just can be. And I wanted to bring something to the table that is not inexpensive. You know, my whiskey isn't Jameson prices. Like, it's a bit more expensive. No. And I just think the deal is, if you are going to be paying X amount of money for my whiskey, I have a responsibility to tell you everything about it and what's in it, and the fact that it's the different ages that are in it, and I'm sourcing it, I'm not distilling it, but that's okay because I'm blending it and da-da-da-da-da. So that's really kind of part of my DNA, and it has flown through into the business, and people love it, because why wouldn't you? You want to be told the truth from companies. Like, I do.
Yes, me too. Truth in advertising, right? But even more so, and I saw this on one of your previous videos, because I did not know this, right? You're actually restricted on what you can put on the label of a bottle. And I don't think that's just in the EU, or I think it happens here in the States as well. But you can actually say on social media, on your website and things like that, what's actually happening, so that people are well and better informed. So knowing it's like, oh yeah, this wasn't just like, hey, here's what I did. I took this, you know, really inexpensive, not so great known brand and paired it, and I had no other stuff, and I slapped a label on it, and I'm going to charge you an exorbitant amount of money. And what I found was that was really refreshing to read about on your website, and just it doesn't take long to do a Google search on you and JJ Corry. Amazing, cool stuff, right? And as far as a price point, you know, I'm doing my Irish whiskey tasting at the end of this month, February 26th on a Friday. And just for those in the St. Louis area, I'm not going all over the country or anything like that. I'm going to be able to touch people a little easier. But the thing that I found is that when you're talking about quality and a little bit more, whether it be a single grain or a single malt or this type of blend, your price point is right in line with that. So I think it's very fair.
Like that blend there, the Gale, that's our flagship blend. And the heart of that blend is a vatting of 2002 malt, single malt, and 2006 single malt. And then it has like this top dressing of, and I'm talking about vintage years, like 1991. So when it went into that bottle, it would have been like 29 years old. So wow. The most of this whiskey is really old. And then there's a 10-year-old grain in here as well, the 40% of like a 10-year-old grain in there. So these are old whiskeys, and I'm not allowed to say it on the label. It's this weird law in Europe. When I launched, I did put it on the label, and I got into so much trouble I had to take it off. But I can tell you, like here tonight, and I can say it on Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram. Like social media has allowed me to pursue that and to say like, all right, have you got a question? Here I am. I'll answer it, and I'll tell you. And that's quite liberating these days when you're a small brand, because you can communicate directly with people and just, put it out there and let them know.
And it's, again, so refreshing. And I want to taste it. I want to be drinking and sipping with you right now, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to stay blind to it until the 26th, true to my core. Keep integrity around the tasting. Now, I do have Jenny, our fabulous media coordinator, in the background. Jenny, did you have any questions for Louise? Because I know you're like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to talk to you. I shared some other videos and she got really excited. But Jenny, what questions might you have for Louise?
I am super curious what the environment is like as a woman in the industry. If that was tough, what was easy, what was hard, like what was surprising?
Yeah, so I've worked in the booze industry, for the alcohol industry, my whole career, right? So I went in when I was a fresh-faced 22-year-old, and I've worked in New York, Paris, London, Singapore, and my farm in Ireland for these like big multinational companies. And when I went in my 20s, it was different than it is now. Like, that was 20 years ago, so it wasn't, I wouldn't send my daughter into that environment. I don't have a daughter. I wouldn't send my niece into that environment, but I had come from a farm on the west coast of Ireland. I just kind of got on with it. You just kind of, back then there was a lot of like casual kind of sexism that would go on, but it was culturally acceptable, and you just kind of got on with it. And then I've been fortunate enough then to work in multinationals throughout my career. And as my career has gone on, they've been very good about ensuring a level of equality, and ensuring that women felt safe and protected. But then I left the multinational environment and I came to Ireland and moved back home. And I hadn't lived here in 20 years. And I'm the only Irish female founder of an Irish whiskey company. And the reason is that the environment is just 100% male for whatever reason. It's 100% male. And I didn't care about that. Like, I don't care, so I just came in and was like setting up the business. And I got some funny looks, it was not because of my gender, I don't think. It's just that I was one of the first new independent Irish whiskey companies coming in that was breaking the duopoly. There's like 2 or 3 guys that make whiskey and that's it. And I came in and was like, I make whiskey as well, and I'm doing it in a completely different way. And of course you're going to get a hard time. But I don't care. Like, I'm too long in the tooth. Like, I know I got to plow my own furrow and just get on with it. But I do take an extreme responsibility about ensuring, in my role as a female founder in Irish whiskey, in ensuring that people realize that it's possible and doable and aspirational to do. So I hire a lot of women, and I don't have a discriminatory hiring practice in that regard, but I do look out for women to bring on and into the business, because it shouldn't be interesting that I'm a female founder for Irish whiskey. I wish it wasn't, but it is right now. But the next generation, it won't be interesting if you're a woman running an Irish whiskey company. And I feel very responsible for creating that environment moving forward in what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. So I'm always mentoring and open to speaking to women in the industry who want to come in to give advice and all the rest of it. But yeah, I wish being a woman in whiskey wasn't a thing, and it won't be, but right now it's a thing. It matters.
That's awesome. Well, thanks for doing that and leading the charge for our generation and the next.
Yeah.
It's very cool. Jenny, what other questions might you have?
Oh, that was my biggest question. My secondary question would be, what is your favorite whiskey?
That is a good question.
That's a very good question. So I have a cask. There's another brand I'll tell you about in a second, but I have a cask of whiskey in my rack house here. And it's probably now worth a huge amount of money. Like, we could probably make a lot of money if we've sold it. But I went to my directors last year. I have a board of directors that I work with, and I said, we're never selling this cask. And I was like, and I'm telling you right now, we could make this much money if we ever sold it. We're never going to sell it. We're keeping this cask, and this cask and I are going to grow old together, and we're just going to enjoy and we'll share this cask with special people when they come in. And that is a 1991 sherry cask that's sitting in the rack house. Other than that, I'm a massive fan, and it's not an Irish, it's a Scotch, of Talisker. Like, it's a lovely kind of smoky Talisker. I love smoke on anything, and I'm a huge fan of that. And I'm also a very big fan of Balcones out of Texas, the craft distillery out there. They have a mesquite kind of smoked whiskey as well. The name kind of escapes me right now, but I absolutely love that as well. And I've been down to, I go to Louisville quite a bit. So I have a couple of favorite bourbons as well. And I'm just naming all the whiskeys now, aren't I? You asked me for one.
You are. I got my one cask that I'm never going to share with anybody else. And all these other lovely brands that are outside Ireland. Yeah. No, I have great friends who make incredible whiskey here as well. Like, there's up in Killowen Distillery, they're doing some really interesting stuff. And down in Waterford, they're doing some really interesting stuff. So the lovely thing about being a whiskey bonder is you get to taste everything all the time. So it's kind of hard to have favorites, Yeah. Well, I know I did pick up a bottle of the Dingle you recommended. I tried to get some of the other ones that you recommended, but they just weren't available to me in the States yet.
Yeah, you won't find them. Dingle you'll find in the US, and that's great. Like, they were the first craft distillery in Ireland. They were the first one. And I founded the business like about a year after them, but they were the first guys who were like, okay, we're founding a little tiny distillery.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful stuff. Well, Louise McGuane, this has been fabulous. Is there anything else you'd love to add before we sign off today?
No, I mean, happy St. Patrick's Day, I suppose. It's coming up over there. I know it's a very big deal in that neck of the woods.
It is. I know, right?
Thank you.
Of course. I wanted to show off one more cool thing about your bottles. And I didn't know this until I saw you put it in the snow. But on the bottom is a wonderful shamrock and your logo. And I thought that was, in looking at bottle design and things like that, just in going through my own little education and process, and most people overlook bottles. But I thought that was very cool. Jenny, I don't even know if you saw it the other day when we pulled it out of the box. Did you see that?
Yeah, it's cool. And if you stamp it in the snow, or the sand, it makes a little shamrock in the snow or the sand. It's really cool.
So I know where to find you, but if other people see this video on YouTube, right, where can people find you? What's your best URL, Instagram? What's that?
Yeah, so URL is jjcorry.com, and on Instagram we're at Whiskygate, and with an E. And that's the same on Twitter. And you'll find me on Instagram at Louise McGuane, my whole name, basically. Yeah, and anything you ever want to know, you'll find it on our Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter or whatever. Like, you just do a search for us, you'll find us. We're pretty vocal on there, and we're always happy to talk.
It's very wonderful stuff. Louise, thank you. It's always lovely to chat with you. Great doing it on Clubhouse. Great doing it here. I can't wait till our future meeting where we can actually be together and sit down and enjoy a little glass together.
For sure. Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And everybody else out there, thank you for watching today. And like I always say, we may not see you in person, but we're always going to see you right here on social media. Thanks for watching.